Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, The Prayers of Queen Kunti. We're doing texts 48 through 50 today. So we'll do 48 responsively. No. Yeah. Thank you, though. Aho me pashyata jnanam.
Aho me pashyata jnanam.
Priti rudham dharatmana. Parakshaiva dehasya. Bhavo me shohi nirhata. Aho me pashyata jnanam. Riddhi rudham dharatmana. Parakshaiva dehasya. Bhavo me shonahir Bhavyo me shohi nirhata. Aho me pashyata jnanam. Riddhi rudham dharatmana. Parakshaiva dehasya. Bhavyo me shohi nirhata. Others?
Aho me pashyata jnanam. Aho me pashyata jnanam. Idhi rudham duratmana. Idhi rudham duratmana. Parakshaiva dehasya. Parakshaiva dehasya. Bhavo me shohi nirhata. Bhavo me shohi nirhata.
Vaishnavis?
Aho me pashyata jnanam. Idhi rudham duratmana. Parakshaiva dehasya. Bhavo me shohi nirhata.
Vaishnavis?
Aho me pashyata jnanam. Idhi rudham duratmana. Parakshaiva dehasya. Bhavyo me shohi nirhata. Aho me pashyata jnanam. Idhi rudham duratmana. Parakshaiva dehasya. Bhavyo me shohi nirhata.
Aho. Oh. Me. My. Pashyata. Just see. Ajnanam. Ignorance. Vriddhi. In the heart. Rudham. Situated in. Duratmana. Of the sinful. Parakshasya. Meant for others. Eva. Certainly. Dehasya. Of the body. Bhavya. Many, many. Me. By me. Akshonahi. Combination of military phalanxes. Kata. Killed. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. King Yudhishthira said, O my lot, I am the most sinful man. Just see my heart, which is full of ignorance. This body, which is ultimately meant for others, has killed many, many phalanxes of men. Purport. A solid phalanx of 21,870 chariots, 21,870 elephants, 109,650 infantry, and 65,600 cavalry is called an Akshuhini. And many Akshuhinis were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Maharaj Yudhishthira, the most pious king of the world, takes for himself responsibility for killing such a huge number of living beings, because the battle was fought to reinstate him on the throne. This body is, after all, meant for others. While there is life in the body, it is meant for the service of others. And when it is dead, it is meant to be eaten by dogs and jackals or maggots. He is sorry because for such a temporary body, such a large massacre was committed. Text 49. I'll just read through. Baladvidya suhinmritya pitre bhartri gurudruha nameshan nirayan moksho yapi varsha yutai. I have killed many boys, Brahmins, well-wishers, friends, parents, preceptors, and brothers. Though I live millions of years, I will not be relieved from the hell that awaits me for the sin. Report. Whenever there is a war, there is certainly a massacre of many innocent living beings, such as boys, Brahmins, and women, whose killing is considered to be the greatest of sins. They are all innocent creatures, and in all circumstances, killing them is forbidden in the scriptures. Maharaj Yudhishthira was aware of these mass killings. Similarly, there were friends, parents, and preceptors on both sides, and all of them were killed. It was simply horrible for him to think of such killing, and therefore he was thinking of residing in hell for millions and billions of years. Text 50. Naino ragya praja bhartur dharma yudhe vadhod vasham iti mena tubodhaya kalpate shashanam vacha. There is no sin for a king who kills for the right cause, who is engaged in maintaining his citizens. But this injunction is not applicable to me. Report. Maharaj Yudhishthira thought that although he was not actually involved in the administration of the kingdom, which was being carried on well by Duryodhana without harm to the citizens, he caused the killing of so many living beings only for his personal gain of the kingdom from the hands of Duryodhana. The killing was committed not in the course of administration, but for the sake of self-aggrandizement, and as such he thought himself responsible for all the sins. Om Jnana Timarandisha Gananjana Salakaya Chaksulamita Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpa Turvischa Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitano Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So in the first purport, Srila Prabhupada says, Yudhishthira was the most pious king in the world. So why would he feel, and is now stating, that he was the most sinful? Well, of course, it's explained in these verses. He feels that millions of people died on his account, just so that he would be the emperor. And they were not just soldiers, Kshatriyas fighting, it was also innocent people that were killed, which is a natural thing that happens in most wars. And he also reasoned that Duryodhana was not an evil ruler, other than his treatment of the Pandavas, which was quite evil. But as far as the citizens, he wasn't persecuting them. He wasn't like King Vena, who stopped sacrifice and didn't allow Brahminical culture. He pretty much followed Brahminical culture, although he was not a particularly good person. So why was it necessary for this huge massacre, for all of this suffering on account of Yudhishthira being enthroned? Although, of course, Yudhishthira was the rightful king. But Yudhishthira feels since all of this suffering was caused only for his benefit, then he was the most sinful of people. Now, of course, Yudhishthira is not actually sinful. He has unlimited good qualities, and in fact, the very fact that he is saying how sinful he is shows some of his good qualities of compassion, of mercy, of feeling sorrowful that so many people have suffered. These are actually his good qualities, not his sinful qualities. Now, so I want to talk a little bit today about why he's feeling this way and what are his actual good character and good qualities, and to get a little bit of understanding about why Yudhishthira is lamenting in this way. So Yudhishthira, as we know, is known as Dharmaraj. Dharmaraj because his father was Yamaraj, and Yamaraj, of course, not only is he the king of death, but he's also the knower of all religious principles. and he's of course one of the Mahajans mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he has, as a father, one who knows all religious principles, and he was also known to be very, very righteous. So Yudhishthira was known for his righteousness and understanding of Dharma, and also for his kindness, humility, compassion, and truthfulness. So he had all of these good qualities. He was an expert in understanding religious principles. Of course, one of the best examples is the well-known story of when he was questioned by the Yaksha. Of course, this was after his brothers were, I think it was a Brahmin lost his staff or something, his rod. And anyway, they went to this, the brothers one by one went to the lake to try to retrieve this for the Brahmin. And they all, because it was a long walk and they were thirsty, they all drank the water and they fell over dead from the poisoned water. So finally Yudhishthira comes to look for his brothers. He sees all the 4 brothers laying there dead around the pond. Of course, he's very upset. And a voice comes from the sky, or it's not from the sky, it's actually from this, first there's a voice, and this Yaksha, who's this great sort of powerful, almost demoniac type of being, whatever, appears to him and says the only way that he can get his brothers back to life is by answering his questions. So Yudhishthira does. And of course, they're rather clever questions, somewhat difficult, tricky, and he gives very, very expert answers, showing his wisdom, showing his knowledge of all religious principles. And of course, probably the one most well known is the Yaksha asks him, what is the most wonderful thing in the world? Now you could think, you have to give the right answer, and there's so many ways you could answer that. What's the most wonderful thing in the world? But he comes up with the best answer. He says, the most amazing thing in this world is that even though one every day sees countless living entities dying, he still acts and thinks as if he will live forever. And that is quite wonderful. And I think most of us fall into that category. It's so, at any rate, he satisfied the Yaksha with his example of knowledge of religious principles. And of course, it turns out that the Yaksha is actually his father Yamaraj, and the life is returned to his brothers. So this was just an example. And there are so many examples how he was a speaker in many places in the Bhagavatam, in different discussions. He was part of very, very wonderful discussions on the Siddhanta of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, as a devotee, unlike he is saying here, how he was so sinful and he caused all the death of all these people, it certainly was not for lack of kindness and compassion. It wasn't because Yudhishthira is now saying, look at me, I'm the greatest king there ever was. I killed more people than anyone. Look at all the millions of people that I killed. I'm such a great Kshatriya. No. Exactly the opposite. He sees all of this as to his shame, that he was the cause of all of this killing. And kindness, of course, is an important quality for an advanced devotee. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 12th chapter, when talking about the qualities of intelligence, it says, Adveshta sarva bhutanam maitri karuna, that the devotee is non-envious towards all living entities and a kind friend. So a devotee is not only kind to his friends, but kind to everyone, which includes his enemies. And of course, a devotee does not see others as enemies, at least an advanced devotee does not, as Prahlad Maharaj. He said to see friends and enemies he called that, that's politics, diplomacy. And he wasn't interested in that. That's what his teachers were trying to tell him. All the ways of conniving, seeing friends and enemies, how to work things so that you get the best advantage over others. Prahlad Maharaj says, I'm not interested in this. All this friends and enemies is Maya, it's illusion. It's just simply materialistic diplomacy. And this is the mood of the devotee. And of course it was the mood of Maharaj Yudhishthira. And in fact, Maharaj Yudhishthira is called, one of his names, and I looked this up this morning, and there's 4 or 5 different verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, at least 4 or 5 that I found, that directly call Yudhishthira Ajata Shatru. What does Ajata Shatru mean? It means one whose enemy was never born. So this isn't a casual thing. This is like one of his names, like Arjuna is called Dhananjaya, or there's certain names that Krishna calls them repeatedly, that are there. There's a number of them for Arjuna that are in the Bhagavad Gita, and this one of Ajata Shatru is such a quality and characteristic of Yudhishthira that it's mentioned, as I said, 4 or 5 times in the Bhagavatam. One whose enemy was never born. Now that's rather remarkable for someone who is fighting one of the greatest battles in history, killing millions and millions of so-called enemies. So the point is that he did not see enemies. Others may have seen him as an enemy, but he did not. And now he is lamenting for killing so many of these. And he's not saying they're all my enemies, but no, he's saying they were friends, they were relatives, they were teachers, they were, innocents. He sees all of these people and all of the difficulties there. And so he, again, shows that kindness and compassion. And this is a very natural thing for the devotee, because the devotee is kind to all, humans, animals, everyone. He sees the pure spirit soul. If you see the soul, then you can't really have any hatred for anybody. And that's very difficult for us. If we confront a situation where someone is giving us a lot of difficulty or causing us pain, it's very hard for us to say, well, that's just his body and it's just my false ego or my mind that's responding to it. But actually we're all spirit souls and we're all servants of Krishna together. It's a hard thing to do. It requires transcendental vision, which we try to develop more and more as devotees. We try to develop that vision. We at least try to think that way, like, well, this would be a good way to think or to see it. And the more that we do that, the more we practice at it, the more we actually will start to see things that way. But anyway, as it said in the Bhagavad Gita 5:18, the humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahman, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater. So the devotee is a friend to all. Why? Because Krishna is the friend to all. And we have those minute qualities as Krishna has. Krishna is called in Bhagavad Gita 5:29, the 3 qualities are mentioned there of Krishna, and one of them is Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, the dearmost friend and well-wishers of all living entities. He's also, of course, the controller of all the worlds and the recipient of all sacrifices. But here, for one of the 3, he says he's the dearmost friend and well-wisher of all living entities. So why? Because Krishna's desire is for us to return to him and not suffer in this material world. Now, it's interesting, this idea of how Krishna is the well-wisher of everyone. This actually involved Maharaj Yudhishthira, a very interesting discussion about that, because Maharaj Yudhishthira, this was after the Rajasuya sacrifice and after the killing of Shishupal. Shishupal merges into the body of Krishna, right? He gets, what liberation is that called? Sayuja? I can't remember. So, what is it? It is Sayuja, okay. The liberation of merging into the body of Krishna. It's not something devotees particularly are looking for, but at any rate, here's someone who is a demon, and he gets liberated. And so Maharaj Yudhishthira asked Narada Muni, how is this? How does even a demon like Shishupal receive liberation? And Narada Muni says to him, Bhagavatam 7:1-31, my dear King Yudhishthira, the gopis by their lusty desires, Kamsa by his fear, Shishupal and other kings by envy, the Yadus by their familial relationship with Krishna, you Pandavas by your great affection to Krishna, and we, the general devotees, Narada Muni is just a general devotee, that's his humility, by our devotional service have attained the mercy of Krishna. Somehow or another, one must consider the form of Krishna very seriously. Then, by one of the 5 different processes mentioned above, one can return home back to Godhead. So, this is Narada Muni saying, by any process that one remembers Krishna, and Shishupal was meditating on Krishna all the time, even though it may have been out of envy or hatred, he was meditating on Krishna constantly. So any contact or meditation on Krishna is beneficial because Krishna is all good, all pure, and any association of the living entity with Krishna is purifying. Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, Samoham sarvabhuteshu namedaveshu stina priya ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mayiteshu chapyaham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion as a friend is in me, and I am also a friend to him. So this is kind of like a paradox in a sense. Krishna is saying, I am equal to everyone. But if one is a devotee, if one offers service to me and a friend, then I'm also a friend to him. So is that being partial? Not really. It's reciprocation and kind. And Prabhupada explains that in the purport. Prabhupada says, one may question here that if Krishna is equal to everyone and no one is a special friend, then why does he take a special interest in devotees who are always engaged in his transcendental service? This is not discrimination. It is natural. Any man in the material world may be very charitably disposed that he has a special interest in his own children. The Lord claims that every living entity in whatever form is his son, and so he provides everyone with a generous supply of the necessities of life. He is just like the cloud which pours rain all over, regardless of whether it falls on rock or land or water. But for his devotees, he gives special attention. One of the qualities of Krishna is his reciprocation with all living entities, and particularly with his devotees. He's called Bhaktavatsal. He is one who is particularly fond of his devotees because basically Krishna says, whatever you want, I'll respond that way. If you want to be in this material world and forget me, I'll let you forget me. If you want to remember me, then I will be there. And whatever way that you want to remember me, whatever way that you want to love me, I will be there in that form. If you want to love me in the form of Nrsingadev or Lord Ramachandra, then you can develop the highest Krishna prema in that way. If you want to worship me as Krishna, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead in Goloka Vrindavan, then I will bring you to me. So this is Krishna, all kind, all good to living entities, and always impartial. And so, thus, a great devotee, eternal associate of Krishna, like Maharaj Yudhisthira, has the same qualities of impartiality, of being kind to everyone, caring to everyone, and reciprocates in time and kind. So, another example of Maharaj's Yudhishthira's compassion is an interesting story about Maharaj Yudhisthira and the dog. Now, I found that this is in Mahabharata, and so I can't, I couldn't find any of Prabhupada's books, the Acharya, so I don't know if it is or there, so I can't say it's 100% accurate, But Mahabharata, it's from the Mahabharata that was translated by one of our devotees, and it's in the database, so I assume it's at least 95% accurate. No. That's just my disclaimer, since I didn't really find Prabhupada tell this. Anyway, after the Pandavas renounce, everyone is killed, everyone is gone, they have the fratricidal war, all the relatives are killed, it's only the Pandava brothers left. So they say, that's it, time for us to go back. And so they start a long journey, right? Long journey. Where are they headed towards? Bhadrakashram or up to the Himalayas or something? Anyway, and to go to heaven, yeah. Well, anyway, that's what their goal was. I don't know how somehow this big journey to get to heaven, to the heavenly planets. And, they fall away one by one. And finally, Yudhishthira's, of course, they all end up. Finally, Yudhishthira's left. He makes it. And Indra comes to him to take him to the heavenly planet. But a dog followed him the whole way. There was a dog walking with him. And he says, all right, well, you have to take the dog too. And Indra says, we don't have dogs on the heavenly planet. You can't have a dog here. Right? No, I said, there's no dogs on the heavenly planet. Anyway, but Maharaj Yudhishthira said, I'm not going if the dog doesn't go. More or less, that's what he said. This dog has been loyal to me. He's taken shelter of me. Therefore, he doesn't go, I don't go. So then what happens? The dog turns into Yamaraj, again, his father. And he said he was so pleased with him. He said, because you have such a sense of, loyalty and of taking care of all living entities, then you are qualified, like that. And so that's... that showed one of his qualities of compassion. This mercy towards all living entities. It's called Daya Bhuteshu in Bhagavad Gita. Mercy towards all living entities. So Krishna has that quality of compassion, and Krishna exhibits his compassion to his devotees in the same way, or in a similar way. But it's hard for us to approach Krishna directly and get Krishna's mercy directly. So because we're not so pure, able to really enter exactly into Krishna's exclusive entourage, we approach Krishna through his devotees. We approach Krishna through the spiritual master. We render service to the spiritual master, and then he offers that service to Krishna. We also, Prabhupada told us how we can offer a service and appeal to the mercy of Radharani, because Radharani is the most merciful personality. Krishna has the great quality of compassion, but that compassion is actually personified and manifested in Srimati Radharani. Srila Prabhupada says in purport Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam 2.23, in the Brahma Samhita, it is said that the Lord is never to be found by becoming a great scholar of the Vedic literatures, but he's very easily approachable through his pure devotee. In Vrindavan, all the pure devotees pray for the mercy of Srimati Radharani, the pleasure potency of Lord Krishna. Srimati Radharani is a tender-hearted feminine counterpart of the Supreme Whole, resembling the perfectional stage of the worldly feminine nature. Therefore, the mercy of Radharani is available very readily to sincere devotees, and once she recommends such a devotee to Lord Krishna, the Lord at once accepts the devotee's admittance into his association. Prabhupada said that several times. He'd say, if you approach Radharani, you please Radharani, then she says to Krishna, Krishna, there's this very nice devotee doing some nice service. So Radharani becomes our intercessory to be able to approach Krishna. And then one more, Prabhupada said, Radharani is, this was in a lecture on Radhastami, Radharani is Hari Priya, very dear to Krishna. So if we approach Krishna through Radharani, through the mercy of Radharani, then it becomes very easy. If Radharani recommends, this devotee is very nice, then Krishna immediately accepts. Because it is recommended by Radharani, Krishna accepts. So we approach Prabhupada, we approach Radharani, these great merciful personalities, and they will help us to approach Krishna. Now, of course, again, not only do we approach Radharani to advance in devotional service and please and serve Krishna, but we also have the special privilege, we have the special opportunity that Krishna came in the mood of Radharani. The combined form of Radha and Krishna is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically came, he gave us the easy process of Sankirtan Jagya to become purified, and if we can take shelter of him, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. He is considered the most merciful, the Namo Mahabharanaya Krishna Prema Vidayate. And he's given us this easy process of self-realization, but also the highest, deepest, absolute truth. So we're very fortunate in this way that we can approach these great devotees and great personalities to gain Krishna's grace. Another quality Naraj Yudhisthira exemplified was truthfulness. And devotees understand and can impart the truth of spiritual knowledge. When we talk about truthfulness, it's not just a matter of, I tell the truth, I don't tell a lie. Like there's this story in America that we all heard as kids, how George Washington was famous for never telling a lie. There's a story about a cherry tree, and he chopped down the cherry tree. His father said, "Who did?" And he said, "I did it, Father, I can't tell a lie." So this is his great quality, that he stupidly chops down the cherry tree, but he didn't lie about it. And at any rate, that does not exactly make him a saintly personality. I mean, he did a few things, I think, more important than that. But that was a famous story, because it is a great quality of being truthful, and people recognize truthfulness. In fact, it's explained that the four religious qualities are being destroyed one by one, and in Kali Yuga, truthfulness is the only one that's a little bit left. And the bowl of Dharma is tottering even on that one leg of truthfulness. So it is a very important quality. But it also means that one tells the truth about what is important in life, about spiritual life, about the meaning of life, how somebody can help themselves and actually become happy. That's real truthfulness. Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita 10.4, truth should be spoken in a straightforward way so that others will understand actually what the facts are. If a man is a thief and people are warned that he's a thief, that is truth. Although sometimes the truth is unpalatable, one should not refrain from speaking it. Truthfulness demands that the facts be presented as they are for the benefit of others. That is the definition of truth. Now, I think one of the very important phrases here is Prabhupada says facts should be presented for the benefit of others. So in other words, unnecessary unkindness is not necessarily the essence of truthfulness. To just insult somebody and mention some bad quality about them for no good reason that's not going to be helpful to them, that's not truthfulness. That's just being unkind. So that's not what's meant. We want to not just to speak truth, but absolute truth, and deliver a message of Krishna for the benefit of mankind. So so whatever our communication is with someone else, and we're saying, well, I just told the truth, we have to say, was it for our satisfaction or for their benefit? If it's just so I felt good, then what's the benefit? That's not real truthfulness. Real truthfulness is telling so that a person will benefit from that. So you might help them, maybe give them deeper realization, better understanding. Okay? One of the best illustrations of our Yudhishthira of his truthfulness was the time that he was not truthful. I'll talk about that in a minute. Yudhishthira was famous for his truthfulness and very strict adherence to Dharma. That's why, as another one of those interesting little, quirks, or not quirk, just an interesting pastime, a lila, part of the Mahabharata, and part of, the whole story. It's actually in, I think it's in Srimad Bhagavatam too. Krishna actually asked Yudhishthira to lie. In the battle, things were not going well, so, it was Dronacharya, right? Dronacharya was fighting, was about to defeat Arjuna and defeat the warriors. And Dronacharya's son was Ashvatthama, as we know. So Krishna tells Yudhishthira, yell out that... said, call out that Ashvatthama is dead. And he knew that would just totally, throw Dronacharya off his game, as they say. He wouldn't be able to, he'd be so heartbroken, his son was killed, he wouldn't be able to continue. And Yudhishthira hesitated, because that's not true. But it turned out that there was an elephant named Ashvatthama who had just been killed. So it's kind of a half-truth. He said, you can just say Ashvatthama is dead because the elephant has actually been killed. So he complied. Why? Not that he did not want to say something that was not true, but it's because it was Krishna's order. And that was the important thing. The highest principle, the highest religious principle, and greatest truthfulness is always to follow the order of Krishna. Because, as it says, Krishna, what is the verse? Dharmaktu Sakshad Bhagavat Prinitam. That the highest truth, the real principles of religion is that which is enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whatever Krishna says, that's truth. That's the highest principle, so we follow that. And if Krishna says, you need to tell a little white lie here, then that's what he does. Now there's another, I think it's Mahabharata again, it's mentioned that on their way to Krishna Loka eventually, or wherever they went, Maharaj Yudhishthira had to see hell, right? So sometimes they said he had to say hell because he told a lie. The Prabhupada actually explained it wasn't because he told a lie, it's because he hesitated to follow Krishna's order, right? In other words, that's the real principle. Just because he hesitated to follow Krishna's order, of course he did follow it. So that's the real principle. So Yudhishthira was not at fault for the killing at Kurukshetra. It was Krishna's will and arrangement, and he was simply being the instrument. It's very similar to what happened in the beginning, before the battle started, when Arjuna hesitated and had some of the same doubts and questions, kind of foreseeing that this was going to happen, this mass killing of certain people. Arjuna said, I don't want to do this. And of course, then Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita to him, and so he understands the same principle, that this was Krishna's desire, Krishna's will, And it's all happening anyway. It was all happening by the hand and the will of the Lord, and that his job was simply to be an instrument and perform his duty, his service as a Kshatriya, as a devotional act to Krishna. In the same way, this is the situation with Yudhishthira. The battle was not just to put him on the king. Krishna had his own reasons to rid the world of demoniac kings, to, reduce the military power, to glorify the Pandavas. Krishna had his own reasons. So therefore, he was simply acting as an instrument. Now, fortunately for Yudhishthira, as this chapter ends, it's kind of inconclusive. But in the next chapter, in chapter 9, when Bhishma is laying on the battlefield dying, he speaks many, many wonderful things of philosophy, but he also speaks directly to Yudhishthira and informs him, this was not your fault. This all went on by the will of the Lord. So then, of course, he was able to pacify Yudhishthira. So Yudhishthira could really understand from a great devotee like Bhishma Dev, how he was an instrumental in Krishna's desires. So for the devotee, his highest purpose is to fulfill the desire of the Lord. And even if sometimes that is difficult or uncomfortable, that is really, really the highest platform. So, again, Yudhishthira's feeling so much remorse and that he is sinful is simply a matter of his good qualities of feeling kindness and compassion. But he will understand that he was not at fault, and this was all due to Krishna's desire and Krishna's plan and arrangement. Okay? Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Are there any questions, comments? Anyone?
I have question.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, let's go.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, thank you for the nice class. When we speak of Maharaj Yudhishthira being a righteous king and fighting a righteous battle, there's many people, even in the modern day, who will say that, the battle I'm fighting is righteous, and they'll do many things and kill innocent people to do that. So how do we explain to people what's actually righteous and what's not, that though these people may be killing in the name of God or in the name of religion, that what they're actually doing is wrong?
Yeah, and people, it's hard for people to understand that unless they really do have a concept that, first of all, God, and that God is control, and he has his plan for the world. So the question is, are you actually fulfilling God's plan, or are you using that? Because many, many wars have been conducted in the name of God. And that's what people object to, and they'll get confused. They'll think, the Muslims say that when they're blowing up people with terrorists say, it's for Allah, it's for God. Although, obviously, real Muslims would disagree. They'd say that's not actually, Islamic philosophy. But nevertheless, the Christians, the same thing. Christians carried on all sorts of wars, inquisitions, crusades, many atrocities, and it's probably been done by every religion. So that's a natural question people have. So it takes a little bit of faith to understand that this is a different situation that happened thousands of years ago, and there actually was righteousness, when there actually were devotees of God, and that these kings were Rajarishis. They were saintly kings. They were not just warriors or politicians, but they were great devotees of Krishna, great devotees of the Lord. And as we can see, Arjuna didn't want to do this. Yudhishthira didn't want to do this. He's lamenting afterwards. In other words, their motivation was not for power, not to, gain some property or piece of land, or, simply consolidate their empire. Their whole motivation was, what did God want? How to please God. And as I said, Krishna had a particular plan here. To rid the world of these demoniac kings, to restore religious principles. As he says, he comes, every time Krishna comes, he comes to save the pious, to give pleasure to his devotees, to annihilate the miscreants, and to reestablish the principles of religion. So he's fulfilling his purposes, and a devotee just sees himself as an instrument. And if you're a Kshatriya and you happen to be the instrument that needs to fight a war on God's behalf and Krishna's behalf, then so be it.
Thank you.
It still can be difficult to explain to people in the modern, which I understand. Yeah. Yes, Prabhu?
Thank you for the very nice class, Prabhuji.
So my question is, what do you need should do, what you should be doing in case of when you think something is beneficial for somebody, but it's also not very loving, or it's my kind of not good to hear that. So what you should be doing in that case?
Oh, okay, you're saying sometimes someone will do something they think is beneficial, but it's not in a very loving way?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, we'll try to do it in a loving way. I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
So something you think something that you need to tell somebody which is truth,
Okay.
but at the same time it's not very
Well,
good to hear that.
Yeah, you want to say truth in a way that's palatable, and as Prabhupada says, for the benefit of others. Now, sometimes it's hard to do that. Sometimes it can't always be done, But at the same time, it really has to do with motivation. If there's some relationship, if people understand you're working, that you're coming from a point of helping them, or at least in a sort of a neutral frame, that it's not, then people are more willing to hear. I don't know, I've given a different example of this in my own life. I've had devotees, like, say, working for me in the department, that I can tell you one or two that I actually got fired. And then we were later best friends. Because, I don't know how that happened, Krishna's mercy, that somehow I was able to do it in such a way that it wasn't like destroying the personal relationship. That it was, in other words, in trying to always maintain that, and people the idea that you don't want to hurt them or harm them, you wish them well. In other words, if the other person sees you as their well-wisher, they're more likely to take bad news or take something that might be, you're saying, well, maybe you should do this in a better way or a different way. And that requires some humility too. I think if we're humble with people and if they see that we're a well-wisher, then the message is more palatable.
I have a question that there is a pastime in, I guess, Brahma Vaivarta Purana, where a sage was sitting under a tree, and there is a butcher who was chasing the cow. And when the cow came near the sage, the road split. And so the sage opened the eyes halfway and saw the cow went by. And then later on the butcher came and says, hey, did you see which way the cow went? And he was speaking the truth, didn't want to lie. But then he had to face Jamaraj, end of his life. And he confronted, he said, I didn't do anything wrong in my life. He said, oh no, you actually made this cow get killed because of you. So my question is, the material truth, there is a connotation.
There's a certain relativity of truth. And a lot of it has to do with, it's interesting. I don't want to digress. It's late, I know. But there's a lot of these studies in what they call moral development. There's what was his name? My gosh, it's been years I used to teach this. But, they have these different stages, and I think, in this one, what he did was he posed a dilemma to people. And the dilemma was something about, it was called Heinz and the drug. I don't know why it was Heinz. Okay, a man's wife is dying. There's only one drug that can cure her. The drug costs $10,000. The guy's fairly poor, doesn't have any money. And he goes to the druggist and he says, can I somehow work this out? Can I pay it back? Can I do it over time? He didn't have a credit card, I guess. The drug said, nope, pay or that's it, $10,000. So his wife's going to die. So he went in and robbed the drugstore, got the drug to save his wife. So the question is, was this moral? Was it not moral? Why? These are the kind of things. In other words, it's relative. In other words, was it a higher purpose to save a life than not to steal? Which is the same sort of question there. In other words, Yamaraj is saying it's a higher principle not to kill cows or to protect the cow than it was to tell a small lie, which, didn't really hurt the person, it just saved the cow. He didn't kill the butcher, all it would do was save the cow. So it's that kind of thing, these are like moral dilemmas, and so you always have to look at what is the higher purpose. Now, it was interesting when I was studying this that sometimes they've even, this is even encoded in law to some degree, at least informally or in case law. There was a case in Arizona. Boy, I'm going off the rails here. Anyway, there was a case in Arizona where a person was out in the desert and they were like lost, stranded, dying, about ready, and they came to a house that was closed up. No one was there. And so the guy broke in, to get some food and water to save his life. And then later he was arrested. The guy said, "This guy broke in my house." And the court ruled, well, no. I mean, it was like justified. Maybe he had to pay for fixing the door or something. But, he said, no, it wasn't criminal breaking. He had to save his life. So in other words, you have to view the greater context of these things. And for us, first of all, it's like, what is the higher spiritual value? What is the highest religious principle involved? And particularly, what is it that Krishna would want? What is Krishna's desire? What is Krishna asking us to do in this situation? We don't always know, of course, but that's an interesting point, because it's not always black and white. Because sometimes you have a conflict between two values, right? Two different truths. It's kind of like, if you were in Nazi Germany and someone was a Jewish person or someone was hiding in your basement and they come to your door and say, "Are there any Jews in your house?" I'd probably say, "Nope, nobody here." Right? You can say, "Oh, no, yeah, go down in the basement, you can go and take them away and kill them." No. In other words, same idea.
I have another question. Yudhishthira Maharaj disobey, in one sense, Krishna's order, and he had to see the hell, as you were narrating the story. Prabhupada actually mentioned that. So.
Yeah.
My point is that we can make it relevant to our present life, like we follow Prabhupada, and now we follow Prabhupada through his representative GBC board. So if the GBC board made the decision that you should not bow down you should not touch the floor because of this COVID-19. It's just a simple example. But at the same time, Prabhupada says, one of the quotes that I like a lot, he says that the purpose of Krishna consciousness movement is to train each individual independently thoughtful and competent in all departments without bureaucracy. So now, this happened actually with some devotee here. So if the devotee is thinking, well, in the Bhagavatam says that if I bow down to the Lord, I don't know when death is coming, at least I will be protected. I will not face the Jamaraj. And that's exactly what 6th canto Bhagavatam says. Says that, well, Prabhupada said, I have to think independently. So what is your view?
Well, first of all, I think it's really interesting because that's a very, very often quoted quote from Srila Prabhupada's letter about being independently thoughtful. But interesting, that was a letter to Karandar, I forget what year, and if you read the whole letter, it's quite interesting, and no one ever reads the second half of the letter. In the second half of the letter, Prabhupada talks about how the GBC must go to the temples and make sure that everyone is following and this and that and the other thing. No, it's just, in other words, yes, independently thoughtful, but we still have to follow the rules and regulations, and we have to go through a particular system and organization that Srila Prabhupada created for maintaining that. So both are there. In other words, an intelligent devotee is able to juxtapose different ideas, and they may be in conflict. And that's part of being independently thoughtful. I think, in other words, to be able to say, well, in this hand there's this, in this hand there's this. Now, what would Prabhupada say? Would Prabhupada say, well, you should, even though you're supposed to do something like bow down, Dandavatsmi to see the deity, if there's an epidemic going on, like I think that, didn't Mother Mukhi give that story about the cholera epidemic?
Yes.
That
I read it.
yeah, right. The Prabhupada didn't say, "Oh, you'll be protected. Krishna will protect you. Just go and don't worry about the cholera." No, he said, "Don't be stupid," or something to that effect. Don't be foolish. If if it's like you have to take normal precautions. It's almost like here's a very famous spiritual example. Remember, was it Rupa Goswami who was out in the middle of the sun writing his books, and Radharani comes and puts the umbrella over his head? Do I have this right? And then Sanatana Goswami comes. It was Raghunath. But then Sanatana Goswami comes. Sanatana and chastises them.
Yes.
Why are you making Radharani do this?
Yes.
You're making Radharani serve you, holding an umbrella over your head. Go get in the shade. Don't be foolish. So it's kind of like that. Okay, even if Krishna might protect you, why are you making Krishna, doing stupid things, making Krishna protect you? In other words, causing disturbance to him. In other words, try to take care of yourself the best you can, and you try to serve Krishna, not make Krishna serve you.
I like the way you said it, that independently thoughtful means obey the authority because they see the situation of pandemic. So that's actually more way of seeing that independently thoughtful means how to...
Now, if the GBC told you, okay, from now on, you only have to follow 2 of the regular principles and chant 8 rounds, I would say an independently thoughtful devotee would say, no, that's against Prabhupada and the Acharyas and the Bhagavatam. No, I mean, in other words, that's what I'm saying. You have to be a little bit thoughtful, and it's not, at the same time, if something's reasonable and just requires a little cooperation, just why not? Do it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. I'll go to Prabhupada.